Hey guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast where we bring in experts across the franchise family in to share best practices that will help you build a brand that will last. I've got someone with me that I met at a conference up in Canada, Fiona Styant. And if you haven't met her before, then you should definitely go find her on LinkedIn and connect because she's brilliant. And she said a few things that caught my attention at this event. We'll talk about those in a minute, but let me tell you who she is, and then we'll jump into our topic today, which is ways that you can help your franchise manage your franchisees through their thought process of growth and even exiting a franchise brand. But Fiona's the vice president of development at Molly Maid Canada, and so it's a unique role because she not only oversees the franchise awarding process, but also post-award, she helps work alongside operations leaders for training and onboarding and kind of the business strategy as a whole, which is a really unique role. Because of that, though, she has a unique perspective that we're going to get into today. But she's been there for 22 years, so she started when she was 17 years old, as you can tell. And the Molly Maid has a really unique approach in that they a lot of folks very specialized in one type of cleaning, but they where you work, live, and play. They want to make sure people have comfort and ease, and so they span quite a few different types of cleaning, which increases their operation workload and but also lots of opportunity there. So 100% guarantee of their service, and so really respectable brand. I think everybody knows who Molly Maid is. But also, Fiona's been on the board of trustees, the board of directors for the Canadian Franchise Association, and she's also an aspiring pilot. Hopefully, we get some time to do that in the future, and a flight attendant. So, Fiona, thanks for being here with us, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit about Molly Maid, and then we'll jump right into that topic together.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is very exciting. Well, I love Molly Maid. It's a fantastic company, and yes, we have huge brand awareness in Canada. In fact, we have 21 times more brand awareness than our next closest competitor.
Wow.
So, I mean that's pretty good, I would say.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, as an industry standard. Yeah, so we're very well known in Canada. I mean, unless you get into those small towns, which that is actually currently what we're trying to do. Because we're in most urban markets across Canada, because we've been in business since 1979, and now our big goal is to get into kind of the more rural markets and bring Molly Maid everywhere, to everyone in Canada. So we have a different model for that, and it's just a cleaner operator model. And so we're really excited about that.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Well, so Fiona, thanks again for being here and sharing your expertise. As I was mentioning, we're at the Let's Grow event in Toronto, and she said something that aligned so well with what I believe. But my wife and I just sold our franchises in January. We've been multi-unit territory owners. I've serviced the industry, so I just love the space. And I'm a businessman, and a lot of people, and I've sold other businesses before. So when I got into this, like my mindset was like we need to build a business that increases in value so that at some point we exit the business or transfer it on. Like the value of the business is kind of key to me. And people don't talk about it like that, but you did. In fact, do you mind maybe share a little bit with us, like why is it so important to you and to the Molly Maid team that your franchise owners understand what the value of their franchise business is?
Sure, absolutely. I think part of it started, honestly, we weren't as focused on it a number of years ago, but about 10 years ago, we started seeing our franchisees retiring. And what we noticed is a lot of them had kind of taken their foot off the gas, and they had become, a bit more comfortable putting their feet up on their desk, kicking back, because they were making money and the business was, going along, but they weren't really growing. And so we kind of thought, well, that's not what kind of company we want to be. We want to be winning. We want to, get people who are driven and motivated. And so we started thinking, well, what can we do? And so a big part of that is now we started in our training week.
Mhm.
And we actually talk about what is your exit strategy? What are your long-term plans? And we get them thinking about that. Is your plan 5 years? Is it 10 years? Are you looking to make $1 million? Are you looking to make 2 million in sales? Like, well, where are you at? And so when you get to that point, you can kind of work back. But then, as well as that, because once you get in, you're excited, everything's great, then you kind of lose sight of that a little bit, I think. And so
Yeah.
what we do and what we thought was important is when we go out to do our annual business reviews, our coaches do that. Part of our discussion is on the business value. So we say, okay, so when you're looking at what your business is valued at today, let's look at what you purchased it for, like, how much you paid for the business and what it's worth today.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we look at that multiple, we're kind of looking at a multiple of, if it's declining, if it's stagnant, or if it's growing. And we have kind of three different multiples. And so we say, okay, let's look at where you are today. And is your business growing? And if it's not, if it's stagnant, what are you going to do to make it grow? And if it's declining, maybe you need to look at an exit strategy.
Yeah.
So it really kind of changes the mindset of the franchisee in terms of what am I doing this for? Yeah, I'm making money. Am I making enough money or, as much money as I want to make? And really at the end of it, at the end game, like what are you going to sell it for? What's it worth?
Mm. So you guys started this change around 10 years ago, or when did you guys start this process change? I'm really interested to know the impact of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was about ten years ago we started talking about it. It did take a little while for us to implement all of the changes, like
Okay.
from the start of putting it
Yeah.
in the training week to really get people thinking about it, to work with our coaches on the coaching strategy from the beginning, and then putting into place some targets that they were going to achieve. And so when they, so let's say someone came in and said, well, our franchise agreement is a 5-year term. So let's say they came in, they have the full 5 years, then what are they going to do in that 5 years? And then when they got to that, 5-year period, did they reach those goals that they set for themselves? And
Yeah.
if not, why? And are they going to achieve them? And how much longer is it going to take? Because for us, I'm sure a lot of franchisors would say this. In fact, I hear them and I agree with it. We want to always make sure it's the right fit, right?
Yeah.
Not from
Mhm.
just a cultural standpoint, but what they're going to do in the business. And what is the fit for them? So we want people who want to be successful.
Yeah.
Of course, part of our business, like we had talked about earlier, just when we were chatting, is it's really important that the franchisees align with our values, right? And
Mhm.
some of our values are to make sure that the people that we are taking care of have the time to do things that they love to do instead of spending the time cleaning, which is something a lot of people don't want to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm one of them, by the way. Not a big fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's for all those reasons that we started really thinking about it. And also, like I said, because we had a big exodus,
Hmm.
especially kind of over the last, I would say 6, 7 years of
Yeah.
franchisees that were like 35, 36, 37, 38-year
Wow.
franchisees. I
Wow.
call them long-term, not old, by the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
long-term franchisees who retired out. And so we just said, you know what, and we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to allow people to just kind of get to a point and then just kick back and say, I'm okay with this level of revenue, this level
Mhm.
of profit. No, that
Yeah.
doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah. Well, we call that cash flow coasting, right? Like get to that comfort zone. And I was in a meeting and a guy said his son's like just got committed to play D1 football. He was the speaker, and he said, you know, um, no, there's no growth in the comfort zone. There's no comfort in the growth zone. And I find that what you're describing right now is how do we keep people in the growth zone? How do we keep people from getting comfortable enough that they want to kick back and just relax? But we want people to relax too. So it's finding that fine balance. And I love the way you guys do this because now they set goals, right? At the very beginning, they set 5-year goals. I'm guessing 1, 2, 5-year goals or something like that. And so now, as my sister taught me, she was an elementary school teacher, and she said, the best thing I ever learned in my undergrad was that you make another something else the bad guy. I said, what do you mean? She's like, well, the clock. So if everyone's, the kids are racing against the clock to get their spelling test done, you're not the bad guy as the teacher saying, okay, we have 5 minutes left. She says, you don't say that. You say, the clock only shows 5 minutes left. But in your world, you're saying, hey, you guys are not at working. These are your goals. You set your goals. I'm managing you toward your goals that you set. How is that process of using their own goals that they set to help them benchmarking its performance? How has that taken the strain out of that discussion that might have been awkward otherwise?
Oh, it really has almost eliminated it Because you're ultimately, you know what? You're right. It's not the coach coming in and saying, hey, this is what you need to do. No, the coach is coming in saying, hey, this is what you said you want to do. I'm here to help you achieve those goals.
Right.
Let's look at, right? Let's look at how you're doing. Now, I will also say we do assess for fit, and we do that now early on too. And we've
Mhm.
learned that as well,
Oh yeah.
the hard way, by bringing some people in. And sometimes, you know what, we all in development, make mistakes, or maybe, just maybe, you're a bit desperate and you need to get someone into a market, right?
For
Sometimes that
sure.
happens as a resale. And so we allow that, even though that's not the best thing to do. And so then what we do is now we have a process where we look at 6 months, 12 months, and 2 years, and we assess for fit. And we
Mhm.
make very, very specific, it's all documented, it's all discussed, but it's always the conversation is about, how they're doing in terms of how they want to be doing and what their goals are to achieve that. And if they're not meeting that and they're not reaching it, then hey, maybe this isn't a good fit for whatever the reason may be.
Mhm.
And then it's making them see that. So then it's not us saying, hey, again, it's you, it's this. It's like, hey, think about it, take a look at the big picture, and you tell me where you think you should be at this point, right?
Yeah. And now your team, your FBCs, their focus is how do I help you attain your goals? What resources can I do? What training can I do? How can I help your office staff perform better rather than what a lot of the industry does, which is we're going to audit you.
Right.
Everyone loves a good audit,
Yeah.
and then after the audit, I'm going to tell you everything you're doing wrong. Whoa, like no wonder people hate being audited. No wonder there's that natural angst, right? In a lot of brands because rather than looking toward the positive outcome and managing toward that, it's it's almost punitive. It feels punitive all the time, and that creates a really angsty relationship between home office and franchise owners sometimes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the other thing we focus on too is we have four pillars in our business. So
Mhm.
performance, engagement, compliance, and satisfaction. Okay. And so when we go out to do these meetings, one thing we do is we have like it's like a scale of 1 to 5. And in each area we have a few key points and
Mhm.
we ask them to assess themselves. And then on our side, we assess them as well. And
Yeah.
then we meet and we discuss it. And we say,
Yeah.
okay, how do you think you're doing? And here's how we see you're doing. And most of the time, some of it is subjective, but a lot of times you can also bring in the metrics and the actual data. And so that also speaks to it as well, because sometimes, and I love this and I say it all the time, perception is not always reality. Because sometimes you have a franchisee who really thinks they're doing well, and maybe in their minds they are. But when you look at the data and you look at really the key metrics of how they're performing, they're really not performing that well you
Right.
know so
Yeah.
all these things I think help to change that conversation to make it positive and make them kind of take a step back and look at themselves, do some self-reflection, so then
Mhm.
it's them seeing the bigger picture and not us saying, hey, you're not doing this. It's like, okay, here, just look at the information and you assess how you're doing, right?
Yeah, the best. They don't want to listen to anyone else often, and that's a normal human response. With our own team members, sometimes we'll do this, but not often. It's usually when, okay, something's not going well here. Let's us. It's kind of. Do you guys use EOS at all in the way you guys operate? Well,
No.
they have a process like this in EOS where you evaluate. Like, here are our core values. How would you rate yourself? Are you 100% compliant? Are you most of the time compliant? Are you struggling with this one? But we have the manager and the team member do their own assessment. And where you see the gaps is usually where you need to spend some time to discuss because if the manager says, "Hey, you're really struggling," and they're like, "I'm killing it," then sometimes you have to zero in and say, "Do you understand what this core value means and how you should be implementing it?" And that's a meaningful discussion every time if there needs to be.
Yeah.
But I love that
Yeah.
you guys
So
do it that way.
I think all these things help. And the other thing I will say that I've noticed is yes, definitely a better relationship with our coaches and our franchisees. The other thing I will tell you, for 100% sure is when we go out to our company meetings, our seminars, our regional meetings, and our big national convention. Now we find people are, wanting to be winners and they want to be with the winners. And if
Yeah.
you're not on board and you're not doing the things you need to do to be successful, you see those people kind of on the outskirts, those people that were kind of kicking back a bit or are kicking back a bit, they're kind of, they're gonna feel that and they're gonna want to move on anyways. Because the bulk and majority of our franchisees
Mhm.
have that winning attitude.
Yeah.
And they are striving to meet those goals, right? Because we're constantly talking about them.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. And it's, I think people undervalue the impact of managing the culture of the franchise owners that way. Like if you have a bunch of people that are fat and happy and that are kind of inert because they don't want to change anything, you're trying to roll out new programs, you get nothing but resistance. But if the majority are focused on growing and trying to win and trying to scale, they're going to be deploying those things and eager for new ideas. And then the
Yeah.
other folks, as you said, they start to feel like outsiders. And not that you want them. I mean, you want to tip the hat, like, hey, you've been here for 25 years, Bob. Like, we really appreciate you. And perhaps it's a good time for an exit planning. If you don't feel like you fit in anymore, you don't want to put in the effort or invest in the strategies, no problem. Like, there's an easy answer here.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because we did a lot of research and we looked at kind of when was that peak point where we felt that a franchisee was, kicking back, feeling kind of fat and happy, like you said. And for us, it's about the 12 year mark.
Mhm.
So I mean, we're happy to keep anyone in our system as long as they are looking to grow and be successful. And I mean, that's factoring some events that happen in life, of course. But
Yeah.
if we have a franchisee that is all in and they're giving it their all and they're working on goals and being successful, then that's all we're looking for. But that's why I think, back in the day, we had much longer terms on our franchise agreement, and now we've made it 5 years.
Mhm.
Used to be 10 years with some consecutive renewal terms. And we don't do that any longer because, again, I think that's setting that tone of what type of franchise we want to have as part of our system.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's talk about so now you have a conversation, right? Let's say you sit down with an owner. They've been there for 15 years. They've been there for 10 years, doesn't matter. And they you start to see that they're plateauing. How have you guys found what's the best way to approach that conversation with dignity and because I can see how some of them might get offended. And I'm sure the naysayers like will say, "Oh, but that's going to hurt their feelings." Doesn't have to. Clearly, you guys have a good process in place, but how have you found that you maneuver around that with care and delicacy so you don't hurt people's feelings when you say, I think it might be time to evaluate a positive exit? How do you guys do
Or Well, oh, sorry about that. Ultimately, we have our franchise coaches do have really strong relationships with our franchisees.
that?
And there is a level of trust there. And so they are able to have these conversations because our franchisees will say that we do care about them. That is one of our core values is caring. And it is one of our 5 core values. We do care about them and we want to see them happy and we want them to be successful. And I can say that about every single one. And I bring them in, and I mean that. And
Yeah.
so, when we go to have these conversations, we do look at the business value. We do look at the profit they're taking home. We want them to be profitable. That's why we look at their P&Ls every single year.
Hmm.
And so if they're starting to be stagnant or decline, I mean, over a quarter or a couple of quarters, you know what? People have lives. They live lives, things can happen. But if we see that it's, hitting the third quarter, and it's not just due to some situation that's happening, then we're going to step in and we're going to say, hey, we've got to talk about this because you are losing business value, you're
Hmm.
losing profit, and we're losing market share. This is a partnership. It should be win-win, right? And we care about you and we care about your business and we want you to exit, making money and with a great business value. So at that point, usually we'll look at doing some type of performance improvement plan where
Hmm.
we really focus on the key areas of the business that they have to change or improve upon so that they can get growth. and we timeline it. And because ultimately, if they continue to decline, and when we talk to them about this, then that's not doing anybody any favors, right? We want them again to be profitable and to exit with lots of money in their pocket.
Yeah.
So I think it's the approach that we take because it's not just about us. Yeah, we want our market share, and of course, we're very honest about that.
Yeah.
And the more money they make, the more money we make. I mean, that's franchising.
Yep.
So, but ultimately, it's about them too. It's
Yeah.
about their profit and their business value. So when we put it like that, usually most franchisees or most people, they can appreciate that and understand it. And, we're saying like, you don't want to continue to go like this,
Mm-mm.
'cause it's,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of how we frame it. And it seems to work really well.
Yeah. Love that. And I'm guessing sometimes, Fiona, you guys have a conversation with somebody who they don't want to sell, uh,
Yes.
or maybe they do. But let's say you have this conversation. Hey, you're plateauing. It's been a couple of quarters now. Maybe it's time to evaluate, getting things back on track with a plan, or time to exit. When somebody says, I'm happy the way I am, and I'm going to ride my contract out for the next 4 years because I just renewed it. Like, how do you approach working with them? Because that one feels like it would be the most awkward one, I think, to talk to about this.
Yeah, for sure. And we do have that,
Mhm. Sure.
In fact, I have someone right now recently who is just not in a great place and he doesn't want to sell. He loves his baby, as he calls it. And he's fairly new to the system. And to be honest, it hasn't been the greatest fit. So, I've been talking to him a lot. And then now what we're doing is we're just presenting hard data. We're doing some mystery shopping. So we're saying, are you active in the business? Are you doing the things you need to do to be successful, to grow the business? And so we're looking at very specific criteria to measure against. We're looking at his business plan. We're tracking his weekly sales. We're talking about the number of customer or client additions, how many cancellations he's having. So key metrics within the business
Yeah.
that, if you're going to be in this business, another one of our core values is being all in.
Mhm.
If he's not in alignment with our core values. And so I think it's putting everything on the table to say, here's everything. How are you doing? Like, do
Mhm.
you think that you're doing everything you need to be successful? Is this working? Is this a win-win partnership?
Yeah. And I'm guessing it's pretty obvious when you use objective data, right? To have that conversation. How do you help people see the value of planning for an exit at that point? If you're like culture fit, not going to be, it's not working there. They don't align with their core values, or they aren't ready. They're not in growth mode anymore. They really are. Frankly, they're already emotionally exiting right before they physically exit. So how do you help coach people into that phase?
So ultimately, again, I think it comes down to looking at that business value and saying, okay, here's what your business is worth today. If you keep going on this trajectory, okay, your business is worth X amount today,
Hmm.
and it's going to be worth X amount less in 3 months from now. X amount less in 6 months from now. So where do you want to be? And it could take you 6 months to a year to sell.
Yeah.
So think about that. If you don't get that business listed now, then you could be looking at very little, walking away with much less than it's worth. So
Yeah.
we have those conversations. And sometimes when you say it in that regard, then they sit back and they look. And the best predictor of future is kind of past performance,
Oh
right?
yeah. Hmm.
Not always, but in a lot of cases.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and certainly in these situations, I find, and especially if it's been on a continual decline. So you can kind of explain that. And I mean, unless someone really is just so headstrong and not seeing it, most of the time they can understand it. And money talks.
Hmm. Yeah.
People, people, right? Like you invest all that money, you want to walk out with at least what you invested,
Hmm. Oh, hopefully 2, 3x. Depends on how long you're going to be in it. Maybe 10x, 20x. But um,
right?
when you first started doing it, were your owners surprised to understand how much their business was worth in a good and a bad way?
100%. Yeah. A lot of them were really surprised.
Mhm.
Especially in some cases, really surprised at how much it wasn't worth.
I was going to ask with the how I'm guessing it goes both ways, but more often than not, did you find they were overvaluing their business?
They
Yeah.
definitely were, especially the ones that were long term. They really thought their businesses were worth so much more. And so then when we put it out to them, and that's another thing that we started doing too, which I didn't mention, is once a year at one of our seminars, I get up and I do a whole presentation. It's usually not that long, like 40 minutes, and I talk about business valuation. I talk about, when someone goes out to buy a house and you have this beauty, like two houses exactly the same, but one is beautifully manicured and well kept and, everything. And then the other one is dilapidated. They haven't painted it and all those types of things. Well, which business is going to sell and sell for more, right?
Mhm.
So from a compliance standard, you got to look at those two things. So I talk about that. And then I talk about business value and the importance of that, right?
Mhm.
And kind of, from an accountant's perspective, how they evaluate, from, a service industry perspective, how you evaluate. And then I say, okay, where are you today? Are you growing, stagnant, or declining? So I talk about all of those things, how long it could take to sell the business and
Mhm.
start to think about that. Because some businesses, it can take 2 years to sell, right? And so you
Yeah.
want to make sure that you've got an exit plan. So you're planning for that time as well.
I'm so glad you teach them that because most people, especially in service businesses, you guys, in some regards, could argue there's some recurrence, right? Because of subscriptions, but it's still going to be a multiple of EBITDA, right? No one's giving you a top line multiple. You're not a software company. So people generally don't understand that. I didn't realize that. You know how you know stuff and you just assume everybody knows it. But I was talking to people like, oh, my business is worth this much. I was shocked, and I said, well, actually, I don't think that's even close. And this is just a friend I was talking to, and he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, your industry is going to be, just going to how your valuation is going to work, and you got to take a look to see what it is. But you're probably going to have I'm guessing a 3 to 9x, depending on your growth rate, your EBITDA margin, like all these things. They're going to look at those, and they're going to give you a multiple of your EBITDA. So if you've been playing it close to the vest, you've been sucking a lot of cash out of the business for personal fund expenditures like that company boat and that company RV, like your EBITDA is garbage, your multiple is going to be terrible. Your business is worth $70,000 right now. And they're like,
Yeah, and we talk about that too. If you're
yeah.
running all these extra things through the business, and I've seen some very interesting ones, then then you know what? You got to get a normalized statement. You got to be able to explain that. You got to be able to show your true profit. So I talk about all of those things, or at least the 3 years before you're going to sell, like or you plan to sell, make sure that you've got those financials in
Yeah.
order, right? Make sure that
Yeah.
chart of accounts is accurate, right? So we do talk about those things. So we really try to keep all of that top of mind. And I guess it's not just by doing one thing, which we've discussed here, it's by doing all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so the other thing is we did bring in a standard chart of accounts, and that was a few years ago as well. And that's really helped franchisees understand their profitability,
Mm-hmm.
because we did have a problem with that as well. They really, if you said to a franchisee, how much money did you make last year? You'd be like, oh, I don't know. I made good money. Well, how much? How much money did you make? And they couldn't tell you. And I'm like, what? So now we talk about the standard chart of accounts. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about normalized earnings and making sure you understand your true profit and what
Yeah.
does that look like, and
Mm-hmm.
all those things. I think it's so essential as a business owner. And sometimes we have people that come into our system and they're just not as familiar with that side of the business. They're fantastic franchisees.
Oh,
They
yeah.
really are wonderful people, great franchisees. They're just not so great on the financial side.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because having a standard chart of accounts is kind of critical, especially for your item 19. If you want to provide reliable, consistent data, sometimes you get those funky P&Ls back and you're like, I'm not sure how we can report with any sort of accuracy or confidence in this item 19 and the FPD. So,
Well, in Canada, we're lucky we don't have the item 19.
oh,
So,
you're right.
yeah, so that's okay for us. But having said that, what I always say to the franchisees is, how are you going to explain? Like, we're not explaining your profit and loss statement, your financial statement. So, unless you're going to pay your accountant to come out, then you need to be able to explain, right? And so that's what I talk to them about. You
yeah.
need to understand this. Because when you do go to sell your business, you need to make sure that you can explain to the buyer exactly how much money. Because everybody says, like, I swear, in almost all my conversations, it comes up in the first. How much money am I going to make, Fiona? Right?
Well, it depends on you, really. How much do you want to suck out of it? And yeah. Well, and you said something a minute ago. I just want to highlight, and I know we probably better wrap up after that, but This has been great, honestly. Like I hope everyone listening is taking note of ways that you can approach this differently, especially maturing franchise systems where people are starting to renew their contracts, and this is where you really need to start paying attention. But you talked about a 3-year window, and we glazed right over. it. So I'm going to come back. You'd mentioned that your franchisees need to understand, especially if they're thinking they're going to exit sometime in the next 5 years. Anybody who might ever look at their business, any business broker group who might help them put it on the block and try to help them sell it, they're going to require 3 years of financials. And those historical financials are how they're going to derive the value of the business, both stat like current business and future business. And if you're on a growth curve, this is why it's so important you're growing when you're selling, because then you can show a trend line and you can expect a buy rate that actually can reflect a future value or future revenue line of the business. So, but if they don't start 3 years before, if they say, I want to sell my business this year, and then they haven't had a clean chart of accounts, or they've been, shuffling money through the business and personal expenses, running them as business expenses, like it makes the P&L and the EBITDA look bad, the net income bad. So those are usually what you get a multiple on. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure we highlight that for everybody that this process really needs to be a constant dialogue like you guys have, so they can be trained and ready and say, I think I want to sell my business, so I'm cleaning up this year because next year I want to start putting it on the block. So at least you got at least 1 full year of good data to go off of.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to that is that the one thing is people will not buy on potential. You
Mhm.
can say, you can just have a franchise, and this kills me when franchisees say, "Oh, but there's so much potential in my market, Fiona. I know I'm declining, but there's so much potential." But people don't buy on potential. They want to see that growth trajectory. And that's when you're going to get the higher multiple. That's when you're going to get your big bang for your buck, right? And so I always talk about that too, because if you're declining year over year, then the buyers come in are saying, "Oh, what's happening with this market? Like, is this a market I really want to go into? Maybe this is not a good
Mhm.
market for Molly Maid."
Yeah.
Even though it probably is, we just have a potential or a franchisee who maybe has kicked back.
Mhm.
But so those are some of the things too that I think everybody has to remember. It's that 3-year period. You're right. You want to show stable, steady growth, right? So that you can show there is potential in my market and then have the clean financial statements for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Fiona, you've been fantastic. I know you've got to get going. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to follow up and ask you questions and maybe develop a similar program in their brand?
Sure. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up, Fiona Styant. Or you can reach out to me anytime. My email is fstyant at mollymaid.ca. But probably LinkedIn would be the easiest way.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, you've been generous with your time, and thanks again for making a point of sharing some of these insights you guys have gained by rolling out such a good program with your owners. Thanks for that.
Well, thank you. It was great to be here. I really appreciate it.